After being reborn, I no longer stood in the way of any contact between Evelyn and her childhood sweetheart. She gave all her wages to her childhood sweetheart to chase his dream. I used the money I earned from hard work to invest. She got pregnant by her childhood sweetheart and gave birth in the hospital. I bought a southbound train ticket. Later she said that if I agreed to adopt the child she had with her childhood sweetheart, she would agree to marry me. Too bad, with memories from my previous life I had already secured my first pot of gold. This time around, I chose to let them be, and to prosper alone. Chapter 1. Vic, you've always performed well at our factory, but the factory's profits are down this year. As a long-time employee, I'm sure you can understand, right? Hearing those familiar words, I felt dizzy for a moment. 1 second before I had been lying alone on a hospital bed, suffering and waiting sadly for death, but at this moment I was back 30 years. Looking at the workshop supervisor's insincere smile, my chest tightened with bitterness and at the same time swelled with joy. I hadn't expected to get a second chance. What lay in front of me was a voluntary resignation agreement. A few short sentences and I would lose everything I had. I stared at him without expression. I've produced results for the factory and my year-end evaluations are all excellent. Making me redundant can't be solely your decision, can it? Evelyn's face flashed through my mind. Although I already knew the answer, I couldn't help asking. The supervisor's face turned awkward. After a long moment he sighed. Victor, this has always been a family matter for you. I'm only following orders from above and doing things by the book. He didn't say it outright, but I understood. It was Evelyn's instruction. All along she had looked down on me, thinking I was undereducated and had only gotten into the factory through family connections and money. She, on the other hand, was one of the few college graduates in town and naturally beautiful. If it weren't for the fact that my mother and her mother had been childhood friends and arranged an engagement between us when we were little, our lives would never have crossed. The one she liked was her childhood sweetheart, Domingo, the high achiever who had returned from studying abroad. There had never been a place in her heart for me. Thinking of this, I felt a great weight lift off me. Facing the supervisor's slightly nervous look, I gave a faint smile. All right, supervisor, I'll sign. He was clearly taken aback, as if he hadn't expected me to accept so calmly. After hesitating, he sighed again. Victor, why don't you have another talk with your family? Your work ability is strong. It would be a shame to be laid off like this. I shook my head with a smile and looked out the window. No need. The world is big. I want to see it. The confusion in his eyes deepened. He seemed unable to understand. Other factories may be better, but our factory isn't bad. Things will get better. I smiled even more brightly. You can't explain winter ice to an insect born in summer. His perception was still limited to the small patch of land in our town. Little did he know that compared to the national picture, this wave of layoffs was only the tip of the iceberg. Before long, this layoff tide would sweep across the whole country. By the time people began looking for ways to survive, it would already be too late. I decisively took my personal belongings and the layoff notice and left the dormitory. Before I left I saw the layoff list posted on the bulletin board. My name was conspicuously on it. Evelyn. Evelyn, are you really that impatient? In my last life, to keep my job at the factory, I begged a lot of people and used many tricks, all because I didn't want to lose the work I relied on to survive. I especially didn't want to lose my status as a regular employee, for fear Evelyn would look down on me even more. That respectable job was my capital to hold my head up in front of Domingo. Evelyn had a great figure, a pretty face, came from a good family, and was a top student. You could say she was the dream woman for many men in town, so I never wanted to hand her over to someone else. During the mass layoffs in my previous life, because I had behaved properly and worked hard, I squeezed Domingo out and managed to stay at the factory. It was around then that Evelyn Lynn's attitude toward me turned icy. Even after we married under pressure from Mrs. Lynn, she never spent the night at home. She'd rather sleep in the factory's 8-person dorm than share a room with me. The sad truth was that even after years of marriage, Evelyn and I never had any intimacy. We hardly even saw each other except in hurried glimpses during factory meetings. Then things changed when she went on a 2-year business trip and returned with a 2-year-old boy she said she'd adopted. Because Evelyn and I had no children of our own, I didn't resist the boy much. I treated him like my own son and poured all my care into him. Whatever he wanted, I bit my teeth and provided. But he never wanted to get close to me. What he looked forward to most after school was going to see Evelyn. I always thought it was natural for a child to prefer his mother. I had no idea, until the end of my life, what the truth was. For the past 30 years, my nominal wife had long ago become pregnant with another man's child. All those years her business trips were actually spent with Domingo, especially after Domingo was laid off. He happened to catch the wave of the reform and opening up. Evelyn, to keep him focused, naturally took on the role of housewife. But I never expected she would entrust the child to me. While I got up at dawn and worked late caring for their child, they traveled the country together. They left footprints at nearly every famous scenic spot. My life, meanwhile, followed the dull line between factory and home. Even in Mrs. Lin's old age, it was me who looked after her. When I finally learned the truth, I couldn't bear the blow and fell ill. At that moment I understood a phrase: there is no greater sorrow than a heart that has died. I had thought that even if Evelyn treated me coldly, at least I was still her husband. So I was willing to be a stay-at-home husband for her. I believed that if I were sincere enough, she would eventually notice my goodness. Even when people pitied me, gossiped about me, and mocked me, I had no regrets. Everyone said I didn't live like a man. Some even used me as a warning: a useless man who can't control his wife ends up like this. I never paid those words much mind, but lying alone on my sickbed, barely clinging to life, I regretted it. Evelyn came to the hospital with the child I had raised, the boy I had changed diapers for and fed with my own hands. She wasn't there to visit me out of care. As his wife, she had a duty to bury me after I died. The child came up impatiently and asked me, "Dad, where did you put the bank book?" I forced my aching body to open my eyes and spat out a sentence full of hatred through my teeth. "Get out. I am not your father." Chapter 2. They wanted to take everything from me, but I refused. Back when my body had already begun to fail, I had donated everything I owned. Even if I died, I would not leave them a single penny. And yet, even so, looking at those two, my heart was still full of regret. Why had I wasted my life for a woman? For just one woman, was it really worth throwing away an entire lifetime? On my way home, one of the older ladies from the courtyard stopped me. Her eyes brimmed with envy. "Victor, you really are lucky. Today I saw that girl Evelyn carrying a radio and a television home. Such rare treasures. Hurry back, I want to see too." As she spoke, she grabbed my arm and pulled me along toward my house, clearly eager to see the new things. I wanted to tell her there was no need to be so excited. After all, I knew very well the television and the radio were not meant for me. My parents had died early, and the factory repossessed the house they'd assigned to us. From then on, Mrs. Lin had taken me in, and I began a life of depending on others. But the words stuck in my throat, and I swallowed them down. I let her walk back home with me. The Lin family was well off. Their house naturally the most impressive in the alley. 3 bedrooms and a living room, spacious and bright. Evelyn almost always stayed at the dormitory, never coming home. Today was no exception. When we entered, there was no sign of a television. The older lady glanced around, frowning slightly. Then, as if she'd thought of something, she winked at me and nodded toward my bedroom. "Victor, is it in your room?" Before I could answer, an excited voice from next door cleared her doubts. "Evelyn, you're so good to me. With a television, I can teach you English now." At that sound, the older lady's eyes bulged with fury. She dragged me along and kicked open the neighbor's door. That was the first time since my rebirth that I saw Evelyn. She was holding a handkerchief, gently wiping the sweat from Domingo's forehead, her face soft with tenderness. When he saw me standing in the doorway, Domingo's eyes flashed with smugness. He raised a hand casually to greet me. "Victor, you're back. Perfect timing. Evelyn just gave me a television. Tonight I'll cook myself to show my thanks. Come try my food too." Domingo was strikingly handsome, tall, dashing, his eyes bright like stars. He wore a shirt and suit, rare in that era. The shirt collar was slightly open, revealing firm muscles. I turned my gaze to Evelyn. Looking at her slightly rounded belly, I suddenly realized how foolish my former self had been. Such an obvious pregnancy, and I had thought she'd only gained weight. Before I could speak, the older lady burst out, pointing at the television with biting sarcasm. Well, I thought such an expensive thing was meant for Evelyn's fiancé. So it's you, pretty boy, barging in. At her words, Evelyn's fine brows knit slightly. Him? Someone who didn't even graduate high school. How could he even understand a television? Domingo is preparing for graduate school now, and he tutors me in English. Of course he needs the television more. Domingo lowered his head to meet her gaze, the love in his eyes undisguised. The older woman sensed something and opened her mouth. Then, thinking better of it, turned to me with a look urging me to speak. I glanced at the television. With memories from my previous life, I naturally didn't crave such things. But why should I let that pretty boy have it for free? I gave a faint smile. Isn't he supposed to be an overseas returned elite? Why is he even taking postgraduate exams? If my education is low, shouldn't I be the one needing to study more? A guilty look flashed across Evelyn's face. Obviously she knew it was her pressure that had led to my being laid off. I needed learning opportunities more than Domingo did. But she hedged. Don't worry about it now. Wait until next month's paycheck and buy one yourself. Okay. What about the coupons? I shot back. You need coupons to buy electronics, right? Evelyn fell silent. In this era, TV coupons were worth more than money. They were only issued to the factory's regular employees. Under the older woman's scrutinizing stare, Evelyn still couldn't bring herself to look pleased. She turned to Domingo. Domingo, your television, let me see if I can get you one later. All right. The smile vanished from Domingo's face. He unplugged the TV himself and dragged it to the yard, his expression sour. If Victor doesn't want the gift, then I won't bother wasting money on you anymore. With that he slammed the door shut. After he left, Evelyn's face was terrifyingly ugly. Are you satisfied now? We're fighting over a TV. When did you get so petty? I ignored her and quickly turned on the set, flicking to the state news broadcast. That channel was full of future business opportunities. Seeing me pay no attention, Evelyn grew angrier and stood up to block the screen. I warn you, since you snatched the television, the chance to stay at the factory must go to Domingo. Chapter 3. That remark piqued my interest. I hadn't even pressed her, and she'd already walked into the line of fire herself. Since you brought it up, Team Leader Lin, let me ask you this, in terms of performance, seniority, and skill, I'm far stronger than that Domingo in every way, so why am I the one being laid off? Evelyn immediately grew displeased. Her face was full of annoyance as she looked at me. What else could it be? Even if you're laid off, once we're married my salary will be enough for the two of us to live on. Domingo just returned to the country and doesn't know his way around. If he gets laid off, he'll have a hard time. Can't you show a little compassion? I couldn't help but sneer inwardly. Do I look so desperate to live off someone else's support? Clearly I had the ability to live a good life on my own. Yet she'd unilaterally arranged for me to lose my job and insisted on supporting me with her wages. Words of argument rose to my lips. Then I swallowed them back. There was no point. Receiving no response from me, Evelyn assumed I agreed, and her expression relaxed noticeably. Starting next month I'll give you 10 yuan a month for living expenses. The rest I'll lend to Domingo. He's just returned and isn't used to domestic food. A sardonic smile flickered in my mind, though my face showed nothing. Just a few months. Once he adapts, that will be it. I still didn't argue. No use saying more. She said it was a loan, but she probably never intended to be repaid. Besides, she would have to give him children, go through confinement, raise the child. The debts would only pile up. But if two people consent, that's their business, not mine. Do whatever you want. I stated my stance. Evelyn, rare as it was, showed me a gentle smile. If you're willing to understand, that's perfect. Domingo and I grew up in the same compound. I can't stand by while he's in trouble, right? I watched the TV without raising my eyelids and replied, you care so much for him, are you saying if he wants to have a child, you'd be willing to help with that too? Evelyn reacted as if I'd hit a sore spot and abruptly raised her voice. What nonsense are you spouting? If you say that again, don't blame me for turning against you. The conversation ended in discord. I didn't pay it much mind. After all, I'd lost my job and my immediate priority was to find a way to earn money. Neighbors who heard about my layoff came to offer consolation. It's fine. Evelyn has the means. She can support the family by herself. Evelyn lived up to her words and handed me 10 yuan the next day. Then she brazenly moved into Domingo's house. Through the not very high courtyard wall, Domingo's gentle voice carried clearly into my yard. Evelyn, I cut up some fruit, come taste it. Evelyn, do you have clothes to wash? I'll wash them for you. Evelyn, I'm not keen on going to the factory tomorrow. Why don't you take the day off too and we can go out together? Evelyn's saccharine voice mingled with his. I pretended not to hear and focused on my own tasks. One day, I told myself, I would leave this place. While packing clothes, I found 2 brand new dresses pressed at the bottom of the wardrobe. For a moment, the calm surface of my heart rippled. I had bought those for Evelyn back when I first started working, saving every penny, but she had never worn them. Not even once, not a wrinkle anywhere on the fabric. She had never even touched them. What a waste. Might as well sell them. As I thought that, another idea flashed through my mind. In my previous life, right after Evelyn and I got married, a new clothing trend had swept across the country. Fitted collared shirts had been in such demand that supply couldn't keep up. I could easily get ahead this time, buy stock in advance, sell it on the market, and seize the opportunity. I acted immediately, pulling out my piggy bank. Inside was 500 yuan, all my savings. I went straight south and purchased a large batch of clothes. When I came back with the goods, Evelyn, unusually, had returned home. Where have you been these past few days? I ignored her and kept sorting. She walked into the kitchen, frowned deeper at the dusty counters. You didn't even cook. How laughable. She, who hadn't come home for half a month, dared to ask such a thing. When I kept silent, she grew angrier and yanked the clothes from my hands. You're at home now, and you can't even cook a meal. I shot her a cold look. If you want meals or tantrums, go next door. I don't have time to indulge you. Evelyn's face changed. She opened her mouth, then shifted the topic after a pause. Aren't you supposed to be studying? What's the point of fussing over clothes? Her voice dripped with disdain. Clearly, As a so-called top student, she looked down on such things. She had no idea that the talk about exams was just my excuse to take back the television. I'd long known, in my past life, that I wasn't cut out for studying. It's important to know yourself. Seeing that she was about to keep nagging, I set the clothes down impatiently. If you've got time to waste, why don't you check next door? I heard clanging all afternoon, no idea what they're up to. Although the place was now quiet, Evelyn jumped up and dashed out immediately. I thought I'd finally get some peace, but to my surprise, she soon came running back. That shocked me. Usually she couldn't wait to stay away all year. So why was she going back and forth today? The next moment, her words answered my question. My mom called. She heard you got laid off and wants us to get married quickly. I had planned to speak to Mrs. Lin in a while about calling off the engagement. I hadn't expected she'd already grown impatient. I kept silent, waiting for Evelyn's conditions. Sure enough, after hesitating a while, she lowered her voice. Could you tell Mom to delay the wedding until next year? I really don't have the time right now. I sneered inwardly. Juggling two men, how could she have time? But I didn't bother to expose her. I nodded. Fine. Tomorrow I'll explain it clearly to Auntie Lin. At my words, Evelyn instantly relaxed, her expression easing. She even hummed a tune as she left, steps light and quick. Soon after, I heard the door next door open and close again. I drew a long breath, a cold smile tugging at my lips. Of course I would go to Mrs. Lin, but not to postpone the wedding. To rid myself of you once and for all, Evelyn. Chapter 4. The next day, just as the sky was turning pale, I got out of bed. The labor market stalls hadn't yet been reorganized. If you went late, you'd miss out. After a simple bite to eat, I slung my bundle over my shoulder. Inside, besides the wholesale clothes, were also the dresses I had once bought for Evelyn. Before leaving, I also took with me the silver coins Mrs. Lin had given me when we got engaged. Just as I was about to step out, Evelyn returned. Shockingly, she had breakfast in her hands. Seeing me with my bundle, her brows furrowed. So early, where are you going? I was curious too. Normally she ate breakfast with Domingo, but I couldn't be bothered. I just said I had something to do and moved to leave. She suddenly ran over and grabbed my arm. So early, what could you have to do? Eat first. Domingo made this especially. I let out a mocking laugh. Whether he put effort into it or not, what does that have to do with me? At my tone, Evelyn, for once, didn't get angry but sighed. I thought it over. Letting you face my mother alone isn't right. After breakfast, we'll go together. I shot back without thinking, afraid I'll change my mind at the last minute. Her pupils shrank. She didn't dare meet my eyes and muttered in defense. No, I just don't want you to get lost. I'll take you. Over the past 2 years, I'd delivered food to her mother countless times. Evelyn knew this, yet she used such a clumsy excuse. Clearly, Domingo must have said something to her last night. That was why she worried I'd change my decision. The sky was brightening, and I grew anxious. If I wasted more time with her, I'd lose my spot at the stalls. I yanked my arm free. No need. I can find the way. If you're so worried, ask your mother after I get back. I strode off without looking back. Behind me came her call. You're not eating breakfast. I ignored it. I'm a man, not a dog. Just because she feels like throwing me a bone, do I have to wag my tail and play along? On the way to the market, excitement and nerves churned in me. They called it a market, but it was more like a black market. After all, stalls weren't officially allowed here. Luckily, everything went smoothly. Even though my clothes were pricey, they were in hot demand. In no time, they were sold out. Looking at the 300 yuan in my hands, I was thrilled. Pure profit, almost as much as a year's wages. Right after, I went to see Mrs. Lin. Standing at her door, I felt nervous. After all, Mrs. Lin had always treated me kindly, with loyalty and affection. She was the one who had arranged the engagement and often said she hoped Evelyn and I would live well together. She treated me almost like her own son. But this time, I no longer wanted to be her son-in-law. When I entered, her face lit up with a warm smile. But once I said I was there to break off the engagement, her smile vanished, replaced by anger. That wretched girl, was this her idea? She made you lose your job, and now she wants to break the engagement too. Outrageous. She glared at me. Don't worry, Victor, I'll scold her myself. I shook my head with a smile. Auntie Lin, it's not about her. I don't want to marry her. Mrs. Lin froze. She couldn't believe those words came from me. That only proved that deep down, she too thought marrying her daughter was above my station. Victor, are you serious? My smile didn't falter. Yes, Auntie, I don't want to live here anymore. I plan to head south and build a career. If I marry, I'll have ties holding me back. A man must fight for his future. Mrs. Lin was silent, her eyes searching me with doubt, but after a while, she nodded slowly in understanding. Just as I expected, if I'd said I was breaking the engagement because of Evelyn, she wouldn't have been able to accept it. But since I made it about myself, she had no choice but to agree. Seeing her nod, I took the silver coins from my bag and handed them back. Auntie, I can't take these. Also, I have one request. I may need to stay in that house temporarily, but don't worry, I'll move out soon. And as for breaking the engagement, I'll tell her myself. Mrs. Lin's eyes were full of pity and guilt. She agreed immediately without hesitation. All right, don't worry about the house. From now on, that's your home. I shook my head and gave a faint laugh. A place with Evelyn in it, how could that ever be called home? Chapter 5. By the time I got home, night had already fallen. The house was pitch dark, but next door shone brightly with light. As soon as I stepped into my room and turned on the lamp, I heard footsteps from next door. Moments later, Evelyn pushed open the door and walked in. You're back. Did you talk to my mom today? I ignored her, busy jotting numbers in my notebook. When I left Mrs. Lin's place, she had slipped me a note with names and addresses, her old classmates, now working in the South, who could lend me a hand. I counted my savings. If I earned just a little more, I'd be able to head south to Guangzhou. The thought filled me with excitement, the corners of my lips curling upward without my realizing. Only then did I notice Evelyn standing there. Our eyes met, and her brows furrowed. Didn't you hear me talking to you? Did you tell my mom today? Don't worry, I told her, and she agreed. My voice was calm. Evelyn stared at me for a few seconds. Then her expression softened. She nodded. This time it's been hard on you. In the future, I'll make it up to you. No sooner had she spoken than the door burst open. Domingo entered without invitation. Seeing Evelyn so close to me, displeasure flashed across his face. Evelyn, why are you still here so late? Why not go home? Home? The word made me want to laugh. This was originally Evelyn's home, and yet she couldn't bring herself to stay in her own house. I'll be back soon. Don't worry. Evelyn's face was full of tenderness as she walked to his side, soothing him softly before returning to sit down. Domingo took a seat, his gaze sweeping the room. When he spotted the clothes I'd bought wholesale, his eyes lit up. Victor, these clothes look nice. You bought them. Evelyn frowned beside him. Exactly. Why'd you buy so many? Got extra money lying around? I said nothing, just gathered the clothes together. But Domingo seemed to have thought of something. A smile tugged at his lips. Evelyn, I'm new here and don't know the market well. It's easy to get ripped off. Since Victor has so many clothes, why don't we ask him to give me a few? No problem. He usually does rough work, no need for him to dress well anyway. Evelyn agreed instantly, then turned and pressed me with her eyes. You won't wear them anyway. Pick out some for Domingo later. My brow furrowed. Disgust welled up inside me. I hadn't wanted to waste words with them, but since they insisted on trampling over me, I no longer bothered with courtesy. I pointed straight at the door. Take your pretty boy, and get out. Chapter 6. Evelyn froze. It was the first time I had ever spoken to her in that tone. She sat there staring blankly at me, her eyes slowly reddening, as if trying to figure out whether I had been possessed. At last it was Domingo who broke the silence. Looking aggrieved, he said, Since Victor doesn't welcome me, I'll leave first. He rose deliberately slowly and walked toward the door, but Evelyn didn't stop him. She just kept staring straight at me, as if she hadn't even heard him. At the doorway, Domingo finally couldn't take it anymore. He turned his head to look at her. Evelyn. She snapped back to herself, but still didn't look at him, only said offhandedly, You go ahead. Domingo's face darkened. He seemed to want to say more, but in the end he turned and left. That left only Evelyn and me in the room. The atmosphere grew heavy and oppressive. Neither of us spoke. After a long time, Evelyn couldn't hold back. She drew in a deep breath. I really don't understand why you have to target Domingo in everything. His parents died early. He studied abroad all alone. It hasn't been easy for him. You've even been neighbors for years. Can't you show some mutual support? I let out a cold laugh. So what are you saying? That I killed his parents? Why should I yield to him in everything? Evelyn's expression turned even uglier. She glared at me, her voice ice cold. Victor, are you even a man? Can't you be more generous? I laughed and shot back. My fiancé spends every night at his house, and I'm not generous enough. Evelyn erupted, springing to her feet, her voice sharp. Don't talk nonsense. Domingo and I are clean. We've never done anything. I brushed it off with a casual tone. I didn't care to argue, nor did I need to. When there's already a child, what's the point of talking about being clean? Ridiculous. But it didn't matter to me. The conversation ended badly. Evelyn stormed out, slamming the door. Fortunately, once she was gone, the place was peaceful again. The next morning, just as I was leaving, I heard the steady breathing of Evelyn sleeping next door. It surprised me, but I didn't dwell on it and went out anyway. For the next month, I left early and came back late. Life was steady and busy. The only unusual thing was that Evelyn began coming home more often. Sometimes she even brought boxed meals. My attitude, however, stayed the same. I ignored her. Every time, Her face showed complicated emotions before she quietly left. I thought she went to be with Domingo, but several times when I opened the door, she was just sitting in the living room in a daze. I didn't bother with her, focusing instead on my own work. Domingo, on the other hand, sometimes deliberately made loud noises next door, trying to show off. Evelyn would rush over, but soon she would return. This strange state of affairs continued for 2 months. Then one afternoon, while I was napping in my room, the door suddenly slammed open, crashing against the wall with a dull bang. I had just opened my eyes when Evelyn stormed in with a basin of cold water and splashed it all over me. "You damned bastard. I didn't want to have conflicts with you, but you've gone too far, spreading rumors about Domingo all over the factory, even sabotaging his bicycle so he broke his leg. You're vicious beyond belief." Chapter 7. The icy shock left my head a little blank. All I could hear was her frantic screaming in my ears. I forced myself up and shoved her aside. "Are you out of your mind?" I snapped. "I haven't even been to the factory these days, and I certainly never went into Domingo's yard. What evidence do you have that I did any of those things?" Evelyn's face filled with malice. Her voice was sharp, still denying it. "Aunt Ma at the alley entrance saw you. You were messing with Domingo's bicycle yesterday." My frown deepened. Last night on my way home I had indeed run into Domingo at the alley mouth. He was pushing his bike and said the chain had come off and asked if I could fix it. I hadn't paid him any mind and walked off. Now they were pinning this on me. I stared coldly into her eyes. "I'm a clean man and fear no slander. If you want to smear me, think again." With that I shoved past her, stormed out of the yard, and kicked open Domingo's door. Evelyn, who had rushed after me, was startled and tried to stop me, but I didn't care. I went straight to Domingo's bedside. He was curled on the bed, clutching his leg and howling in pain. Seeing me, his face went pale with panic. Who told you to come? Don't come near me." I sneered and closed the distance, then raised my hand and struck him hard across the face. "You shameless dog, you asked for it, so don't blame me for being ruthless." Evelyn, who had followed in, screamed and shoved me away. "You're insane. Victor, you actually struck someone." Watching her furious reaction, I couldn't help but smirk. "First of all, let me make clear, I didn't hit a person. Secondly, he started it. If he got hit, he deserved it." "Evelyn, open your damn eyes. Those 2 slaps just now were his doing." Evelyn had never seen this ferocity in me before. She stood frozen, speechless. In my previous life I had always tolerated everything and borne all the grievances for her. This life, how could I possibly put myself through that again? Domingo clutched his swollen cheek, cowering by the foot of the bed, too afraid to speak. Evelyn could only hold him with a face full of pity and whisper comforting words. "I'm sorry, I was late." Then she turned and yelled at me, "Hurry up and apologize to Domingo." I replied coldly, "Apologize? Apologize my ass. If he hadn't asked for his own trouble, he wouldn't have gotten hit." Chapter 8. After that incident, Evelyn moved her luggage straight into Domingo's house. From that day on, she never said a single word to me, as if in her eyes this silent treatment was a way of punishing me. What she didn't realize was that I actually enjoyed this kind of life. But while I ignored them, Domingo wasn't satisfied. Once again, he swaggered over to show off, leaning against my doorway with a cup of coffee in hand. His eyes brimmed with smugness. "This is imported civet coffee," he said with a mocking tone. "Evelyn got it especially to make it up to me. I bet some people here have never even smelled it before." "Huh?" He took a delicate sip, his expression one of indulgent bliss. "You probably don't know, do you? She's carrying my child now. Victor, her body and her heart belong to me. What right do you have to compete with me anymore?" His face twisted with malice, bearing none of the so-called gentlemanly charm he once paraded. At that moment, I finally understood something. Whether in my previous life or in this one, I was never the one unworthy of Evelyn. Rather, it was a woman like her, devoid of any sense of morality, who deserved a scoundrel like him. I looked at him calmly. "I won't fight you for her. Congratulations, you've won yourself a worthless woman. My goals lay in a broader world." Before, whenever I stood before the two of them, I would inevitably feel inferior. They had better family backgrounds, higher education. So in front of Evelyn, I always wanted to prove myself, inferior yet arrogant. But from the very start, this was nothing more than their sordid little game, already rotten at its core, and I was foolish enough to step into it, making myself the victim, when in truth, my life had far more meaningful things waiting for me. At the very least, making money. Even if life had no deeper meaning, money was enough. My composure caught Domingo off guard. He stared at me, wide-eyed, utterly puzzled. "What do you mean by that?" I didn't bother explaining. Smiling faintly, I returned to my room. The next day, I bought my train ticket south. Departure. 2 days later, as I held that ticket in my hand, my heart surged with anticipation. I packed my things, selling or giving away whatever I could. By the time I was done, The room was stripped bare, aside from the furniture, with no trace that anyone had ever lived there. When I finally boarded that train, a sense of freedom and ease washed over me like never before. 2 days and 2 nights later, I stepped onto the sweltering soil of Guangzhou. Thanks to the note from Lin's mother, I soon found her friend and made contact. Once I had settled down, I began keeping an eye out for business opportunities. It didn't take long before I had my own small factory, and soon after, my own home. When I earned my first real profits, the very first thing I did was send money to Lin's mother, as a gesture of gratitude. But unexpectedly, just a week later, I received a reply. It wasn't from her, it was from Evelyn. The letter was filled line by line with syrupy words of affection. She wrote of how much she missed me, how she wanted to bring me home, how she wanted to bear my child. I tore it up without hesitation and tossed it straight into the trash. A page full of ridiculous lies, only a fool would believe them. Chapter 9. Later. Evelyn never came looking for me. After sending me letters for about half a month straight, she fell silent. The next time I heard news of her was a month later, a letter from Mrs. Lin. Evelyn was dead. She had died at Domingo's hands. Ignoring Domingo's attempts to stop her, she tried to abort the baby and declared she wanted to cut ties with him. Domingo, having been fired from the factory and driven to desperation, let evil courage take hold. On his way home from work he kidnapped Evelyn and hacked her to death with a butcher's knife. 2 lives ended. After doing it, he leapt from the building. When I heard the news, I felt little stir of emotion. In this life, Evelyn should be satisfied. She could rot in the gutter alongside the men she loved. Meanwhile, my business only grew larger. Before long my factory spread across the entire South. I also met a woman I cared for, married her, and had children. In this life, I lived only for myself.